Hello everyone and welcome to video 3.1.8 for the Legal Studies Guide. Our quote today is often not attributed to Mary Schmick who said it. I believe it's usually attributed to, now I'm drawing a blank, the wife of a president, Eleanor Roosevelt perhaps. And it's the quote, "Do one thing every day that scares you." Easy to get bogged down into the mire of year 12 and forget to maybe take some risks and do some things outside our comfort zone. So maybe that's my challenge to you for today. As I said, we are at video 3.1.8, and this is the reasons for a Victorian court hierarchy in determining criminal cases, including specialisation and appeals. As we have established earlier on with things like the rights of victims and the rights of the accused, as soon as we see the word including and it gives us two specific things such as specialisation and appeals, we know that these are specific questions that can be asked of us on an exam. So you could get a question like, explain why we have a court hierarchy with regards to appeals, and you would have to use appeals to explain that. You can still get the general question of, though, say, explain the reasons for a court hierarchy in criminal disputes. That is because our skill, which we'll get to later on, is just an explain skill. So we're not needing to evaluate, justify anything here. So our essential question today that I'm hoping you'll be able to answer at the end of this video is, why do we have a court hierarchy and how does this relate to criminal law? Well, this is our court hierarchy in Victoria. We have a magistrates court, followed by a county court, followed by the Supreme Court. For some reason that picture's coming in late as well, but we have the Court of Appeal, and then we have the High Court. Now, in terms of criminal matters, we can basically scrub out the High Court. It's very, very rare for a criminal matter from a state jurisdiction to end up on appeal in the High Court. So we're going to focus purely on these first four. Please note, as I've said at the top, the jurisdictions of these courts, so what they actually do is assumed knowledge in Year 12. If we wanted to do a quick recap, it's pretty simple. The Magistrates Court, if we're talking their original jurisdiction, hopefully you remember this, the Magistrates Court deals with summary offences, and the County Court and Supreme Court deal with indictable offences, obviously depending on the level of severity. And the Court of Appeal has no appellate jurisdiction. No original jurisdiction, only an appellate. If we wanted to then quickly look at the appellate jurisdictions, pretty simple, almost the opposite. No appellate jurisdiction in the Magistrates Court. It is the lowest court, therefore it does hear no appeals. And up the top here we have the Court of Appeal, which hears all appeals from the County Court and the Supreme Court. Any appeals from the Magistrates Court are dealt with in the Supreme Court if it is on a point of law, and in the County Court if it is on conviction or sentence. Okay? Again, assumed knowledge. I'm literally just going to leave that there. If you don't know these jurisdictions, you need to go and do a little bit of work on it to make sure that all of this about the court hierarchy makes sense. As we just looked at in that first slide, the intro slide with all of the essential question on it, is the idea that the study design is giving us two specific reasons for a court hierarchy that we need to know, and these two specific reasons are ones that we can get direct questions on, and they are appeals and specialisation. So we're just going to cover those two today. So reason one for a court hierarchy, appeals. Now, just a heads up, the example that we're going to use here to illustrate this is a example from the family court. Family law is civil law. However, it still does illustrate what happens with appeals, and I'm going to ask you later on to go and find some criminal examples. Essentially, with appeals, if there are grounds for it, so either on a point of law, conviction, or sentence, any dissatisfied party can take their matter to a higher court to have that decision reviewed. This allows for fairness, and we start thinking about our principles of justice, because if perhaps you feel like you have been treated without impartiality, so you have been treated unfairly, you have an opportunity for that mistake to be rectified in a higher court. If there were no higher and lower courts, so if we did not have a hierarchy, then there would be no higher courts to appeal to. This all works off the assumption that higher courts are essentially smarter. They're more experienced. It's safe to say there are less judges in the Supreme Court than there are magistrates in all of the magistrates' courts around Victoria, and therefore to become a Supreme Court judge or justice, you have to be pretty darn good at law. Not to say a magistrate isn't darn good at law, but perhaps not up to the level of the people who have been selected to sit on the bench of the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal. Therefore, you are essentially, if you feel like something's been done wrong, by having these higher courts, you are able to ask a more experienced, better judge to review the decision. This happened in this civil case, like I mentioned, the Kevin and Jennifer case. The Kevin and Jennifer case was a case regarding the Marriage Act. So obviously the Marriage Act has changed in the past year or the past couple of months to read that marriage can be between two people. It doesn't have to be a man and a woman. But this case occurred when the Marriage Act clearly said that marriage must be between a man and a woman. And in this case, I think it was Jennifer, the female, was Kevin, the male, was a post-operative transsexual male, so had been born female, but had had basically surgical procedures and hormone therapy and the like to become a man. They wanted to get married. The government said that they weren't allowed because Kevin wasn't technically a man, and marriage must be between a man and a woman. So they took it to the court, and the court ruled that no, Kevin and Jennifer could get married because for the purpose of the Marriage Act, a post-operative transsexual male is a man. The Attorney General wasn't happy with this. The government wasn't happy. So they appealed to the full court of the Family Court and got more judges in to actually review that decision because they believed it did not fulfill the intention of the Marriage Act. These more experienced judges and more judges reviewed that case, heard the arguments again, and upheld the original decision. So they didn't change it. But sometimes the decision may change on appeal. So this is just an example of being able to go to a higher court, or in this instance to the full bench of the Family Court, to get the decision reviewed by more experienced judges. Our second listed reason for a court hierarchy is specialisation. So basically within the system of a hierarchy, so within our higher and lower courts, these courts have been able to develop their own areas of expertise. On the simplest level, this is that courts like the Magistrates Court and magistrates in those courts have gotten very, very used to dealing with things like theft, low-level theft, speeding fines, driving on Eastlink without a permit, dealing with them quickly and efficiently so that they can hear more cases and roll through them quickly. On the other hand, or further up the hierarchy, heinous crimes, really complex cases, so we're talking things like murders, really serious drug trafficking. Judges in the Supreme Court, for example, have heard these cases multiple times. They're very much well aware of how the law works in this area, and therefore, again, they can deal with things more quickly and efficiently. As well as this, there are some courts that develop specialised lists, particularly for specific crimes. So the drug court in the magistrate's court is a great example of this, because the drug court is there to deal with any lower level summary offences such as thefts, perhaps low level assault, that have occurred as a result of someone's drug addiction. So you are a drug addict, you are in debt to your dealer, you break into someone's house and you get arrested for burglary. That's being heard with the magistrate's court. You can get that heard in the drug court, because the reason you committed that crime was to try and fuel your drug addiction. That's a specialised list and example of specialisation in the courts. Again, dealing with that case quite commonly, therefore they're good at dealing with it. Our skill here is to just explain, so we just need to show understanding of the reasons for a court hierarchy in order to get the full mark. So the sort of question you might receive is something like this one. Outline 2 reasons for the use of a court hierarchy in criminal matters. And again, it's pretty simple, as we've been over several times. Outline is very much in that understanding section, so I'll put it here again. To outline something and get all the marks, we just need to show understanding of it. 2 reasons, it'd be pretty simple. 2 marks and 2 marks for each reason. Your 2 marks would be coming from 1, identifying the reason, and then 2, showing your understanding of it. Half an answer to this might look like this, quite simple. 1 reason for the use of a court hierarchy in criminal disputes is appeals. There's a mark. Okay? I'll put that exactly here. 1 mark there. Nice little stem just to enter, or to get the reader prepared. I'm saying 1 reason for the use of a court hierarchy is this, so using that question in my answer. By having a hierarchy of higher and lower courts, if an accused person or the prosecution feels they have been treated unjustly, because the prosecution can appeal as well, they are able to have their case reviewed by a superior court. Pretty simple. I've shown that I understand why a hierarchy is important to appeals. You're not showing what appeals are. You're not just explaining what an appeal is. You're explaining what an appeal is, or why we need a court hierarchy for appeals. So by having higher and lower courts, if you believe you've been treated unjustly, you're able to have your case reviewed by a superior court. So I'm not just explaining what an appeal is, I'm linking that to why we need a hierarchy for it. As always, how does this contribute to the principles of justice? Here's our blank table. Pause it now, try and fill this out as best you can, and we're going to flick over in 3, 2, 1. Straight up, it achieves fairness, and we talked about this when we talked about appeals. If you believe you're treated unfairly, so if you believe you've been treated without impartiality, then you can have that rectified. You can appeal and you can get that fixed. That's fair. Hey, I was treated unfairly, so I'm going to get someone else to look over it and treat me fairly. Boom. As well as this, specialisation should ensure outcomes are fair, because you're getting your case heard by someone who's an expert in that area. Equality's there because everyone can appeal, even the prosecution. So essentially you're equal because you all have the ability to appeal. And having specialised courts ensures greater timeliness because they can deal with cases quickly and they can get to the root cause of the offending, as opposed to getting stuck looking at other things. And you don't get a judge who's sort of not sure what they're doing and needs to go and do extra work on it. You basically get a judge who's like, yep, I understand how this works. I'm going to get this case done and move on to the next thing. However, appeals can add extra steps to a case, making it more financially difficult to pursue or more stressful, particularly relevant if the prosecution appeals and you have the case hanging over your head still. How do we apply this to actual or hypothetical scenarios? Well, I've only got one here for you today. It is the Law Report by Radio National, ABC. You can find it in any podcast store. Whilst it's not Victorian related, they did a look at about a half an hour episode at South Australia's gambling court. Works off the same premise of the drug court. Basically, if anyone's committed an offence to fuel their gambling addiction, they can go into the gambling court and be put into a special diversion program. Where they basically have to undergo treatment for gambling addiction. Particularly important for, gambling's well known as a bit of a scourge in our society that affects a lot of different people, and it's a real hidden one. So this is particularly helpful for perhaps people who don't have any form of other criminal record. They fall into a bit of a gambling problem, and maybe they steal from their workplace or similar. So this allows them to go into a diversion program to avoid prison. As well as that, a good thing to do would basically just be to go to any news website, find an article with an appeal in it, and basically look at, okay, why did they appeal? What grounds did they have? Were they successful? So you just get a bit of an understanding of why appeals exist and how that exists in the realm or in regards to the court hierarchy. Have a look at those. Ultimately, though, can you answer our essential question? So, do you know why we have a court hierarchy, and do you know how it relates to criminal law, hint, hint, appeals and specialisation? Good luck. Make sure to leave some comments below this, or head to the Facebook page and give it a review and a share with all your friends. This is the Legal Studies Guy, and we'll be back with 3.1.9 next.